So picture this. It's the spring of 2010,
Okay.
and there's this executive for a major energy corporation, and he's sitting under the glaring lights of a congressional hearing room.
Oh, right. Dealing with that catastrophic oil spill.
Exactly, one of the absolute worst in history. And the interrogators are grilling him, and they really want to know how the company plans to, quote unquote, fix the devastated ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
But the executive leans into his microphone and very deliberately he states that they are deploying every resource available to mitigate the environmental impact.
He refused to use the word fix.
He absolutely refused. And in that one, microscopic linguistic shift moving from fix to mitigate, he fundamentally altered the entire legal paradigm of that hearing.
Which is huge,
Yeah.
because potentially that shielded his company from, billions of dollars in absolute liability.
And that is exactly why we're here. Welcome to the deep dive.
It's the profound difference between, offering a guarantee of complete restoration and merely promising a reduction in harm. That scenario perfectly encapsulates what we're really digging into today.
Yeah, today we are looking at a highly curated mastery list of 30 advanced English verbs.
The ones that target what linguists classify as the C1 level of proficiency, right?
Yes, exactly. But, and I want to be really clear here, our objective goes way beyond just handing you, the listener, a vocabulary sheet to memorize.
Right. Reaching C1 fluency is rarely about acquiring obscure terms you're only ever going to use to win a board game.
No, it's about acquiring a high-definition toolkit for parsing reality. Think about it. When you watch a master craftsperson like a seasoned architect or an elite mechanic, they don't just walk around with a single hammer.
They'd be a terrible mechanic if they did.
Right. They possess calipers and bevels and specialized chisels that are designed for incredibly narrow, precise functions. And advanced English verbs operate exactly the same way.
They really do. They allow you to step into a corporate boardroom or, a university lecture or a tense negotiation and actively shape how the people around you perceive the world.
Because language at this echelon is fundamentally about framing.
Exactly. We're going to deconstruct how these 30 specific tools function mechanically. Because depending on which verb you deploy, you can bring the truth into agonizingly sharp focus, or you can, weaponize your sentences to obscure it entirely.
The choice of a single word dictates the architecture of the conversation. So let's examine the mechanics of that clarity first. I want to specifically look at the verbs elucidate and delineate.
Two great examples to start with.
Right. So if I'm looking through a microscope at a blurry, chaotic slide, using elucidate feels akin to adjusting the focal length until the image is illuminated and readable.
You're bringing the hidden why and how right to the surface.
Yeah, like a lawyer elucidating a client's complex psychological motives for a jury. Or a biology professor elucidating the invisible chemical cycle of photosynthesis.
Well, the etymology actually supports your microscope analogy perfectly.
Oh, really?
Yeah, elucidate stems from the Latin root for light. You're actively dispelling darkness. But, illumination alone is sometimes insufficient.
Right. Sometimes you just see a bright mess.
Exactly. You also need boundaries, which brings us to delineate. If elucidate is turning on the light, delineate is the act of a surveyor walking into a field and driving physical stakes into the ground.
Oh, to mark the exact perimeter.
Yes. A well-drafted law delineates the absolute boundary between private and public property. Or, say, a project manager delineates the specific phases of a software rollout.
It eradicates ambiguity by establishing exactly where one concept ends and another begins.
Precise.
So if you're a professional attempting to articulate a complex strategy, meaning you want to express it with absolute fluency and coherence, you really require both mechanisms.
You do. You elucidate the underlying theory, and you delineate the operational boundaries.
Right. And only then can you effectively disseminate that information. You cast it outward.
Like public health departments attempting to disseminate vital data about a new vaccine rollout.
Yes, or digital networks allowing us to disseminate breaking news globally within milliseconds.
The psychology of disseminate is fascinating, actually, because it implies a broad, almost indiscriminate scattering, like sowing seeds across a vast field.
But we have to consider the darker inverse of this entire process, don't we?
We do. What happens when the objective is not clarity, but obfuscation?
This is where communication becomes a defensive weapon. Instead of elucidating a concept, an individual might deliberately use dense, impenetrable technical jargon to obscure the simple facts of a legal dispute.
Right. They're intentionally throwing a shadow over the truth to protect themselves or their interests.
I can actually relate to that on a much less malicious scale.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, early in my career, I missed a critical deadline for a client presentation. And instead of just admitting I mismanaged my time, I wrote this incredibly convoluted email about, synergizing our timelines and recalibrating our deliverables.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was absolutely trying to obscure my own incompetence behind corporate vocabulary.
We all fall into that trap. But obscuring the truth is merely hiding what exists. The escalation of that behavior is choosing to manufacture something that does not exist at all.
You fabricate.
Yes, you fabricate.
Building a narrative where the foundation itself is a lie.
Precisely the distinction.
Mm.
A journalist who was terminated for fabricating quotes from a politician didn't just obscure a conversation, right? They constructed a phantom event.
Or a suspect attempting to fabricate an alibi for the night of a robbery. They're weaving a detailed synthetic reality to avoid prison.
Exactly. So, as a listener navigating a complex information ecosystem, your primary filter must always be analyzing the verb. Is this source trying to elucidate the issue, or are they attempting to obscure it?
Are they disseminating rigorously articulated facts, or have they fabricated the entire premise?
Right.
But once that truth is laid bare, once the issue is clearly articulated, you hit a wall. You can't just stare at a clarified problem. Society forces you to react to it.
And that naturally transitions us into the vocabulary of systems and solutions.
It does. And I have to introduce some friction here because I think a lot of learners and even native speakers fall into a trap with this specific set of verbs.
Which ones?
Words like ameliorate, mitigate, and rectify. Honestly, doesn't using ameliorate instead of improve or fix just make someone sound incredibly pretentious in a modern tech company or a casual meeting?
Well, it sounds pretentious if it's used incorrectly, sure, like as a mere synonym for fix. But the utility of C1 vocabulary is precision, not decoration.
Okay, sure.
You don't just fix a systemic generational problem. Let's isolate ameliorate. This verb is deployed when you are confronting a deeply entrenched chronic condition of suffering or hardship, and you are elevating the baseline.
Got it. So you cannot miraculously fix a famine overnight.
No, you can't. However, targeted foreign aid is designed to ameliorate the immediate effects of that starvation.
Or a city council introduces sweeping infrastructure reforms to ameliorate living conditions in historically impoverished neighborhoods.
Exactly. It implies a gradual, agonizing process of making a terrible situation slightly more bearable.
So the timeline and the severity of the problem dictate the verb. If ameliorate is a gradual elevation out of hardship, how does mitigate operate mechanically? We discussed the oil executive using it earlier.
Right, so mitigate is entirely about damage control against an incoming force you cannot completely eradicate. You're softening the blow.
So a municipal government cannot prevent a seasonal monsoon from occurring.
No, but they construct elaborate drainage canals to mitigate the flooding. Or think about during an outbreak of an airborne virus.
Oh, right. Wearing a mask does not cure the disease.
Exactly, nor does it guarantee you won't catch it. It serves to mitigate the statistical risk of transmission.
That makes so much sense. The executive used it because fixing the oil spill implied making the ocean pristine again, which is an impossible legal standard.
Right, mitigating it only legally bound them to reduce the ongoing harm.
Which isolates rectify as the most binary of the three. It operates almost like a mathematical equation.
It really does. Rectify is reserved for correcting a specific, identifiable error or injustice.
Like a telecommunications firm overcharging thousands of clients due to a software glitch. They are legally obligated to rectify the billing error.
Or a technician arrives to rectify a critical fault in an electrical grid. The situation was objectively incorrect, and you intervene to put it right.
Understanding that nuance completely changes how you listen to a political debate or a corporate earnings call.
Absolutely.
But obviously, human intervention doesn't always result in improvement. We have verbs that capture the exact opposite trajectory, the tearing down of systems.
Right. If you fail to mitigate a disaster, you might inadvertently exacerbate it.
You take a fragile situation and introduce a volatile new element, like a government implementing severe budget cuts during a recession.
They will inevitably exacerbate a surging unemployment crisis.
I tend to visualize exacerbate like an autoimmune response.
Oh, how so?
Well, if you have asthma, the high humidity doesn't cause the underlying disease, but the environment triggers your own lungs to overreact and exacerbate the respiratory distress.
That's a great way to look at it. The mechanism of harm is amplified.
Yeah. And if you aren't actively exacerbating a problem, you might simply be generating friction. You hinder progress.
A sudden lack of institutional funding will dramatically hinder groundbreaking scientific research.
Or draconian local regulations can hinder small tech startups from expanding their operations.
You are essentially throwing sand into the gears. The direct antithesis of that friction is the decision to facilitate. You grease the wheels to smooth the path forward.
Upgrading national rail infrastructure is essential to facilitate rapid economic growth between rural and urban centers.
Or a neutral third-party mediator is brought into a hostile labor dispute, not to dictate the terms, but to facilitate a productive dialogue. They remove the barriers to agreement.
You could take that a step further, couldn't you? You aren't just removing barriers. You might actively foster a new dynamic.
Yes, like an experienced teacher structuring group projects to foster a sense of community among highly competitive students.
Or a regional government introducing aggressive tax breaks to foster a hub for renewable energy innovation. You're deliberately cultivating an environment where something specific can thrive.
But growth is rarely uncontested. The C1 lexicon provides a wonderfully insidious verb for the quiet destruction of that growth, which is undermine.
Undermine. That word feels incredibly potent because it doesn't describe a frontal assault.
No, it doesn't. It describes the gradual, often invisible erosion of a foundation from below.
Like a manager's constant micromanaging criticism will systematically undermine an employee's self-confidence over the course of a year.
Or, in geopolitics, a rogue nation engaging in secret proxy negotiations intended to undermine a fragile peace treaty. The structure collapses because the support was hollowed out.
The friction between those two forces, one group attempting to foster innovation while another seeks to undermine it, inevitably breeds conflict.
It does.
And this brings us to the dynamics of power and control. Imagine standing in the wings of a high-stakes corporate boardroom or watching the floor of a polarized parliament.
The verbs required to describe these actors aren't just descriptive, they are deeply psychological.
Consider the vast chasm between advocating for a policy and coercing an opponent.
You're highlighting the fundamental difference between influence and subjugation. To advocate is to publicly, passionately recommend a course of action based on reason or morality.
Medical professionals relentlessly advocate for a balanced, low-sodium diet to prevent cardiovascular disease.
Or a grassroots coalition might advocate for stricter emissions regulations. The power remains with the audience. They can choose to listen or ignore the advocacy.
Whereas coerce relies entirely on an imbalance of systemic power. You strip away the target's agency.
You're compelling an unwilling participant through the application of force, intimidation, or severe professional threats.
Like a defense attorney alleging that exhausted detectives attempted to coerce a terrified suspect into signing a false confession.
Or a founding executive realizing she's being systematically isolated and essentially coerced into relinquishing her seat on the board of directors. The compliance is entirely manufactured through duress.
That active exertion of power is terrifying. But I think the most profound realization in this mastery list is that power doesn't always require action.
It's very true.
Sometimes the most devastating exertion of authority is absolute stillness. We see this encapsulated in the verb condone.
Condone operates on the sociolinguistic principle that silence is an action. To condone is to passively accept or allow morally bankrupt or illegal behavior to continue without intervention.
A senior manager who witnesses routine harassment on the sales floor but chooses to look the other way effectively condones that toxicity.
The institution's lack of a response becomes a passive endorsement.
So when a university issues a statement declaring they do not condone academic dishonesty in any form, they are attempting to draw a rigid moral perimeter.
Exactly. If you possess the authority to stop a behavior and you choose not to, you condone it.
That makes you, as the listener, reconsider every time a leader claims they didn't know or weren't involved. Their proximity and inaction are the mechanisms of condoning.
But eventually, passive power usually evolves into active consolidation.
We see historical figures or modern executives taking calculated steps to consolidate their influence.
They're pulling disparate, fragmented pieces of authority or resources into a single, unbreakable monolith.
Like a newly elected authoritarian leader systematically replacing independent judges with loyalists to consolidate control over the judiciary.
Yes. Or on a corporate level, an international conglomerate deciding to consolidate its 12 regional distribution hubs into one massive automated central facility to maximize logistical efficiency. The scattered energy is brought to a singular point,
And historically, once power is consolidated, the immediate next step is to curtail the movement of everyone else, to drastically restrict or reduce.
As an economy plunges into a severe recession, consumer spending on luxury automobiles and high-end electronics is sharply curtailed.
Or, in a more chilling context, a paranoid regime introduces sweeping digital surveillance laws to curtail the freedom of the independent press. You are tightening the leash.
The inevitable psychological consequence of constantly curtailing a population's movement or resources is friction. And friction requires only a spark to ignite.
Which is where we use the verb instigate.
Yes. We use it to describe the intentional initiation of a reaction, almost always carrying a negative or disruptive connotation.
An unidentified agitator throwing a brick through a window to instigate a violent riot during a previously peaceful demonstration.
Or an external auditing firm deciding to instigate a comprehensive forensic investigation into a corporation's offshore accounting practices.
The word instigate implies a sudden, sharp catalyst. But if that catalyst leads to a prolonged, negative environment that is allowed to fester, we rely on a verb that carries an immense, suffocating atmospheric weight.
Pervade.
Yes, pervade.
To pervade is to diffuse through every microscopic pore of a space or a system. It can be utilized literally, like the sharp, metallic scent of ozone beginning to pervade the air just moments before a violent thunderstorm strikes.
But it's vastly more powerful when applied to abstract societal concepts, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. A crushing sense of generational hopelessness beginning to pervade an isolated mining town after the primary refinery shuts down.
Or systemic, inescapable bribery found to pervade every single bureaucratic level of a local government. It becomes the water everyone is swimming in.
It does.
So if you are the listener, you have to acknowledge the reality of this environment. You're navigating a professional and political landscape where information is regularly obscured.
Where institutional power is ruthlessly consolidated.
Exactly, and where a sense of apathy might completely pervade the system you work in. To survive that, you have to transition from a passive consumer of information into a rigorous, almost adversarial, critical thinker.
You must demand empirical proof before you allow yourself to react.
Right. And the transition from observation to validation is really the final frontier of C1 fluency. You move into the vocabulary of the investigator.
It's all about how you handle the truth.
Let's place the listener in a high-stakes scenario. You are an institutional investor staring at your terminal as global supply chain stocks begin to wildly fluctuate following an unverified rumor of a trade embargo.
The numbers are oscillating, rising and falling with chaotic irregularity.
Or perhaps you're sitting on a grand jury and the prosecutor hands you a stack of digital forensics. You are instructed to scrutinize the timestamps and geolocation data.
You aren't just glancing at the paperwork, you are examining it with the intensity of an auditor, looking for a single misplaced decimal.
So how do we leap from merely observing the fluctuations and scrutinizing the chaos to actually establishing an objective reality?
That transition occurs on the brutal battleground of two opposing verbs, substantiate and refute.
This is where the scientific method meets linguistics.
Exactly. If a politician or a researcher makes an audacious claim, the immediate demand must be for them to substantiate it.
They must provide concrete, verifiable evidence to brace the scaffolding of their argument.
Right. A freelance investigative journalist who publishes explosive allegations of corporate fraud, but utterly fails to substantiate those claims with internal emails or financial records, will destroy their own career.
We rely on decades of peer-reviewed ice core samples and satellite telemetry to substantiate the reality that the global climate is drastically warming.
And if the individual cannot substantiate the premise, the opposition is waiting to tear it down. They will refute it.
To refute is not simply to disagree, is it?
No, it is to systematically dismantle a statement or theory and prove it objectively false.
Like an elite defense attorney presenting unedited secured footage that definitively refutes the sworn testimony of the prosecution's star witness.
Or a breakthrough in quantum mechanics that completely refutes a long-held assumption of classical physics. The old reality is erased.
It's the ultimate intellectual filter. We scrutinize the anomalies, we demand the experts substantiate their theories, and we rely on the evidence to refute the fabrications.
But identifying the truth is only the diagnostic phase. Eventually, you have to build something new.
You have to take that validated truth and convert it into kinetic energy.
The vocabulary of action. Once the boardroom agrees on the strategy, the company must implement the new protocol. They put the abstract decision into concrete effect.
Identifying that urban traffic congestion is severely impacting local commerce is merely an observation. The city council voting to implement a sprawling, subsidized electric bike-sharing program is the action.
Or a hospital, recognizing a flaw in their patient intake process, will swiftly implement a modernized AI-driven triage system.
But nobody implements in a vacuum. As you take action, you inevitably look outward to analyze the landscape of success. You attempt to emulate the apex predators in your field.
Right, a scrappy, garage-based tech startup furiously iterating their software to emulate the frictionless user experience of giants like Apple or Google.
Or a rookie athlete studying hours of film, striving to emulate the legendary discipline and footwork of their childhood idol.
It is a crucial distinction. You are not plagiarizing, you are reverse engineering their excellence to elevate your own performance.
And achieving that level of excellence almost universally requires you to abandon isolation. Progress at scale demands that we collaborate.
Leading immunologists from rival universities bridging the academic divide to collaborate on a highly complex, urgently needed oncology trial.
High-end Parisian fashion houses collaborating with accessible streetwear brands to produce a disruptive limited edition collection.
It's the synthesis of divergent perspectives to engineer a result that neither entity could achieve unilaterally.
To make that collaboration actually function, you have to be wildly resourceful. You have to utilize every conceivable asset at your disposal.
An urban architect ignoring traditional power grids to completely utilize transparent solar panel technology on the facade of a skyscraper.
Or a forensic anthropology lab being the first on the continent to utilize a radical new form of 3D microscopic imaging to extract DNA from degraded bone.
It is the tactical, hyper-efficient deployment of what you have.
And this brings us to the zenith of our linguistic toolkit. When an individual or an organization successfully integrates all of these concepts.
When they implement flawless strategies, emulate the highest standards, collaborate without ego, and utilize cutting-edge resources.
They transcend being a participant. They become the benchmark. They exemplify the ideal.
They serve as the undisputed, perfect manifestation of a concept.
Like a meticulously engineered zero-emissions building that exemplifies the future of sustainable minimalist architecture.
Or a veteran crisis negotiator whose unnatural calm under unimaginable pressure exemplifies the absolute core values of the diplomatic corps. They are the living definition of the standard.
Which is the ultimate realization of these 30 verbs operating in perfect orchestrated harmony.
It really is.
Let's step back and survey the intellectual landscape we just navigated. We commenced by dissecting the sheer clarity and insidious deception embedded in human communication.
Analyzing the mechanics of adjusting the lens to elucidate a dense theory, or identifying the exact moment an adversary attempts to fabricate an alternate reality.
We waded through the agonizing nuances of problem solving, exploring the psychological distinction between slowly attempting to ameliorate generational poverty versus legally attempting to mitigate an environmental disaster.
We observed the brutal systemic struggles for power.
Recognizing the vast ethical gulf between a leader who will advocate for your advancement and an institution that utilizes its leverage to coerce you or curtail your fundamental liberties.
And finally, we arrived at the rigorous, disciplined pursuit of objective reality.
Adopting the mindset required to aggressively scrutinize the data, demand that actors substantiate their claims, and boldly implement systemic change.
The salient takeaway for anyone attempting to master this language is this. Internalizing this C1 vocabulary does not merely polish your emails or make you sound artificially eloquent in a board meeting.
No, it fundamentally rewires the precision of your cognition.
These verbs construct a high-definition linguistic framework through which you can decode human motivation and societal friction.
You are no longer navigating the world in broad, blurry, rudimentary strokes. You possess the instruments to perceive the agonizingly sharp edges of reality.
Which is incredibly empowering.
So we leave you with a final, provocative challenge to apply this framework today. Consider a recent, intense professional conflict or a complex negotiation you personally experienced.
Rewind the tape in your mind.
But this time, examine the behavior through the lens of this newly acquired toolkit. Which of these highly specific verbs most accurately diagnoses your reaction?
Did you attempt to rationally mitigate the inevitable fallout, or did your defensive posturing inadvertently exacerbate the tension in the room?
Did a superior subtly attempt to coerce your compliance, or did you possess the clarity to calmly delineate your professional boundaries?
We challenge you to not simply recognize these words when you hear them on the news.
Challenge yourself to actively utilize at least 3 of these high-level verbs in your own complex conversations or your critical strategic writing before the sun goes down today.
Do not just study the tools, wield them.
Because the master craftsperson doesn't just stand back and admire the heavy, specialized chisels sitting in the toolbox. They pick them up, they respect the dangerous weight of them, and they drive them into the material to carve out exactly the shape they demand to see in the world. Grab your lens, adjust the focal length, and go construct your reality.